All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, of the London is Blue podcast. Hopefully, your favorite Chelsea podcast out there and a part of the Men in Blazers Media Network. Dan, one of your hosts here. And it is emergency pod season, emergency potch season, even some might say, as Chelsea have, yes, officially parted ways with Mauricio Pochettino on today, the 21st of May in the year 2024. And boy, oh boy, on the back of an idea that we had, a faint glimmer, Nick, on this idea that we would have a quest for stability in the summer and try to build on the strong end this past season. We are now managerless once again to start this crazy circus, this crazy cycle of trying to find a new permanent appointment before Chelsea return to the U.S. for another summer tour in just about 2 months.
Yeah, pretty crazy day, man. To be honest, I think you started to see some of the signs during his press conferences and the fact that they had this end of year review scheduled, and anything can happen in these situations. But even for us, this was a bit surprising, and we are a team that has not found stability, a club that has not found stability. And Brandon, now we are back at square one yet again. New manager coming in, new ideas, and that person's roughly going to have 2 months from, I'm assuming, the start of July when the books start over to implant their ideas on the team before the season starts.
I mean, look, as we know anything about this leadership, if someone else can do it with less, then we're going to rip that off. So we are pulling a Gary O'Neill Wolves situation. We tried to pull off the Graham Potter Brighton situation. So here we are, copying and pasting yet again. But Dan, I don't know. I have a lot of questions, not a lot of faith, and understandably so. But how the hell did this kick off today?
Well, yeah, we're going to get into the official club statement. We're going to chat about just how people are feeling in general, the timeline, which was wonderfully put together by our friend Matt Law, who we will have on the pod very soon. I would say within the next 24 hours, we will have recorded it probably by the time that you're listening to that, and we will drop that as soon as possible. The player reactions, and then who are the candidates to replace Mauricio Pochettino? A short list already exists, but it started in the middle of the workday, nearing the end of our workday here in the US on the Eastern time zone, more centrally related to the time zones of Brandon and Nick. But Chelsea FC can confirm that the club and Mauricio Pochettino have mutually agreed to part ways. Sporting directors Lawrence Stewart and Paul Winstanley said, on behalf of everyone at Chelsea, we would like to express our gratitude to Mauricio for his service this season. He'll be welcome back to Stamford Bridge for Soccer Aid at any time, and we wish him all the very best in his future coaching career. Mauricio Pochettino said, thank you to the Chelsea ownership group and sporting directors for the opportunity to be part of this football club's history. The club is now well positioned to keep moving forward in the Premier League and Europe in the years to come. Jesus Perez, Miguel Di Agostino, Tony Jimenez, and Sebastiano Pochettino have left the club with Mauricio. The club will be making no further comment until such time as a new head coach is appointed.
It's my favorite part of the statement, Dan. Please, dear God, don't ask us any questions about this. We don't have any answers for you, and we will not be talking to anyone. Thank you. Goodbye.
But I mean, do you think they're going to make no further comments about anything, or just like the managerial vacancy? Like, did they just tie themselves up throughout the Euros and were like, we're not saying actually anything? Out of office, we are out. See ya later.
Yeah, I mean, also notable that, and this is like varied through different phases of Chelsea's recent history, but they do use the words head coach instead of manager here, based on what we're going to talk about in a little bit with the, I think kind of process that this ownership group is undertaking and what they're looking for in a new manager. It's certainly not a traditional manager type role. It's more of a coach with a kind of a yes man nod to whatever they are going to cook at the top.
I mean, they basically have all been head coaches over the past 5 appointments. Mauricio Sarri was a head coach. I mean, Antonio Conte, I think, was a manager, but he might have been listed as a head coach. Thomas Tuchel was definitely listed as a head coach and not a manager. Like, that is very much it's a Chelsea thing, baby. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, we should also get some admin out of the way too. We want to, before we talk about just how it all went down, how we got to this point from a Last Supper on Friday to a sending off on Tuesday. And we want to thank everybody who leaves 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Always appreciated. If you can hit the subscribe button and the bell icon on YouTube to get notified when we drop new videos, like maybe this one you're watching right now, hopefully, that would be super great. And you should just say, thanks to Jake in the comments again, because he doesn't hear this part of the podcast, but I see the comments and I send them to him. And you can also sign up to get our free weekly newsletter, The London is Blue Dispatch, written by Sam. He had one about Pochettino's departure that he dropped a little early. And we also can have you jump into Discord, either in a free or paid option to help support the podcast, which is always appreciated. But Nick, I had to run a snap poll just to get a little bit of a guidance from our
Yeah.
listeners on what the mood was, what the vibe was after finding out that Pochettino and Chelsea had parted ways. What did the people tell us?
Well, Dan, you were all over the polls today, so I appreciate that because it's a day for reacts, if you
Regular
will.
Kornacki over here.
Yep. So we're going to go to the polls, and the polls are pretty freaked out right now. You gave 3 options for how you're feeling about the separation today of Chelsea and Poch. Okay at almost 20%, not okay at nearly 27%, and a third option near and dear to my heart, what the fuck, at nearly 54%. So if you really take the not okay and what the fuck, Brandon, you're looking at an 80% clip for how people are feeling. Now, look, this is a little knee jerky to me because I think there has been kind of an undercurrent all season of unhappiness with the manager. But I think the late season form, the fact that we are a Man City FA Cup win away from being in the Europa League next year, and some general better play from the team with a few clean sheets in there, gave people some hope that perhaps this was going to be a experiment that went into year 2. Clearly, that is not the case, and so I think it really upset people.
I think there's probably separation between like whether or not they're happy with Poch versus like the decision and the timing and everything around that, right? So I think even if you were maybe upset or unhappy with the job that Poch did in totality, we're a day and a half, 2 days after the season, right? Like it just ended. And so to me, this shows that it didn't matter how Potts ended the season. The sporting directors slash Igbali already knew what they were going to do. And so now I'm interested in like, okay, when did they know? Like, there's no way that 2 days like decided it. So it's like, was it back to the Arsenal match and they're just going to let this run out? Like, I wonder because there's obviously after that Arsenal match really no good time to make a change, especially that close to the end of the season with the team winning. So that's the way I kind of look at it is that this was definitely premeditated and not a collaboration of minds over a 48-hour period. I don't see that.
Well, you do have the timeline that has been stitched together across a few reports indicating that Bowling Pochettino had dinner on Friday, May 17th. Again, is being heralded as the Last Supper at this point. And we don't know what was had. Food may have been provided, may not have. We don't know. Chelsea finished the season on Sunday, May 19th. There was a end of season review that took place at Cobham sometime starting midday Monday, the 20th, and that bled into Tuesday. Those included meetings with the sporting directors, Stuart and Win Stanley, and potentially a separate meeting that occurred with Egbali. Mauricio Pochettino at some point in Tuesday morning decided that they were going to part ways. And then we have chaos ensuing, Nick. And this doesn't mean just chaos within the supporters, or maybe even the upsetting of the backroom staff situation with multiple departures, not just Mauricio Pochettino, but there was a lot of player reaction on social media. And our good friend now at the BBC, Nizar Kinsella, pointed out just how they found out, which doesn't feel super great either.
No. He said the initial reaction from Chelsea's players is one of sadness. Many found out via the squad's WhatsApp group. There were various nuanced opinions about Pochettino, but he was broadly liked and many believed making progress and said so both publicly and privately. And boy, did they say so publicly, Dan, because as you mentioned, tons of player reacts. And I think like to contextualize these, like we've seen a ton of managers come and go at Chelsea Football Club. the reactions are not always the warmest.
Are you
Like
talking about
let's just
Willian and Conte by
let's
chance?
let's
Trophy
just
gate?
be let's just be honest about that. But I did, as I was reading some of these, it seemed like they're pretty upset. Like it seemed like there it was some genuine emotion pouring out, and that is not only through what was said in words, but the photos that were chosen to represent the relationship with Poch. And it's just something we have to talk about because all we've heard over the last couple of years from this ownership group is stability, stability, stability. We got to make sure that we have the system rolling and a proper manager to implement it. This basically throws stability out the window for the foreseeable future.
Brandon, did you have any favorites of this collection of player responses? We saw some from Cole Palmer, Nico Jackson, Mikhailo Mudryk, Marco Correa, Carney Chukwuemeka, Nani Madueke.
The ones that I would say kind of it's got to be Nico Jackson. How about this? Because he's the most publicly going against this decision,
Yeah.
right? The double facepalm emoji is being like, I disagree. And you've got even Cucurella, who's got the kind of like shocked face. The rest of them are, hey, thank you. Because whether it's those other players, he really gave him a breakthrough. And he definitely resurrected Cucurella's chance in here. But look, Nico Jackson has clearly made it known, but this doesn't matter, right? The new manager is going to come in and he's going to try just as hard because that person's going to have to choose him week in, week out. But anytime there's public kind of um,
Dissent. I mean, it's flat
opposition,
out.
yeah,
Yeah.
dissent, like that's a little bit surprising because that's bullying a dad who pay his bills.
Well, it's Nico. It does like himself a good dissent. Let's not be sheepish about that. He does enjoy it. I also thought Cucurella's was very interesting. Right, this is a guy that had a ton of ups and downs at Chelsea this year. Finished on a better plane than maybe he started on, but he kind of has the surprised or annoyed face emojis with his, and I don't know. I just get the sense that like you look back on these players this year, Dan, and how very little Poch criticized them in public, even when things were not going well, when the performances were subpar. I think he really understood that he had to protect this group more than maybe some of his previous teams that had superstars that could kind of stand up to the pressure more. These guys, I'm sure, appreciated that. I can't imagine a world that they didn't appreciate withstanding some of the blame and kind of putting himself out there first. That's what a leader does, frankly. So I think that is why you're getting some of these kind of reactions from players.
Just for clarification, it's the face with wide open eyes emoji, just in case anyone's looking for the specific one to reference in the photo. As it relates to the players, and I think there's a pro side to it and a con side to it. I think a pro side protecting the players, giving them latitude to grow and progress. I think the con side would be is that I think there were times where some players got a lot of opportunity, sometimes through injury, sometimes not, to continue to play poorly and not get hooked in any way, shape, or form. I think there were some interesting runs of Raheem Sterling this past season that people might point to, where you did have players like Nani Madueke, who was healthy and just not featuring. And some of that was down to, I think, what Pochettino talked about later in the season about his growth, his progression, commitment to maybe more defensive elements in his game. But look, we're going to get a first ad break out of the way. Then we're going to go deeper into our reactions, talking about the pros and cons of the decision or trying to make a case for some of the pros behind this decision before we give you some of your 3-word reactions to the news and talk about who those managers are that might be coming in next. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. All right, Brandon. So we've shared a little bit of thoughts on just how it all went down. We've recounted how the players reacted, what the official club statement was. How are you feeling?
I'm super annoyed at what I deem to be the arrogance of the sporting directors and the ownership group. Um, I know Matt's article said that this wasn't a rash decision. Really, one sleep after the season and then deciding it in the morning of the next day feels pretty rash to me. So yeah, look, I think that this is arrogant that the sporting directors think that they can do better with the squad. And if Champions League was really the hard line, did anybody else watch last season? And the four managers that we had, like I find that a lot of this to honestly just be baffling. Again, I'm not saying Poch is the perfect choice, Nick. I'm just saying when you add up what their talking points that's coming out in the press and kind of the reality of the situation, it feels really disconnected.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, so it was either incredibly rash, right? Or they've wanted to do this for 6 months and the results didn't matter, which is like to me even worse. Like look, I think on this show, especially after the Arsenal game, like I'll raise my hand. I was really frustrated with Poch. At that point in the season, I was like, okay, see you later. I would have been totally fine with that choice at that time. But we hadn't played all the games yet. And I think that, is a lesson to us all to say, that was a really tough result. That's one of my least favorite results in the last 20 years of watching Chelsea. But the team rallied around him after that, and they played really well, and they won a bunch of games after that, and they finished in the European places. So either your expectations were, in my mind, way unrealistic if you thought Champions League this year, just given the tools that you had given the manager to use, or you don't care about the results and you had made your mind up a long time ago. And to me, either one of those, Dan, rings is pretty faulty logic in making decisions. And furthermore, and I know we're going to talk about this as we get into the new managers, I don't think that the criteria they've used thus far for two big hires and three big fires, right? Two big hires being Potter and Poch, three big fires, including Tuchel with those other two, has been very good to this point. They've gotten it wrong a bunch, right? By their own admission, if they're firing Poch 1 year in to the project that they've all told us about, then something's gone wrong that isn't to do with the managers at this point. Like pretty clearly, right? The sample size would tell you that. So I think there's some real concern about what the hell is the criteria that you're using and who's holding you guys accountable to that.
You would argue that if you've had to replace someone in their position multiple times, that you as the individual who is hiring for that position is potentially the problem or the source of the problem because you have not correctly identified the talent, had the right interview type of conversation and questions. There's a really good podcast speaking about American football, the GM Shuffle, which has Mike Lombardi as a former NFL general manager. And he talks a lot about the hiring process for head coaches in the NFL and like what their expectation is to come in and like what their playbook looks like and how they talk about developing talent and the way you interact with players, the way you coach them up. How do you coach players who are now younger and have a different mindset than players who were the way they were coached 20, 30 years ago. And I think there's a lot of value into thinking about what is that set of criteria that you're using to define what success looks like in that role and who can be successful in that role. And it doesn't feel like we've harmonized an understanding around what that is supposed to be. And so I feel like we are still a little aimless in our understanding of who the right person is, taking into account what we want to accomplish from the ownership group and what it also means to be Chelsea. And those things are not aligned. If we talk about what Chelsea has been, Chelsea is a club that supporters would say has a DNA that views winning above all else, that has a do or die mentality behind it. And we have not necessarily hired managers who espouse that mentality. Now, that always hasn't produced results, but more often than not, even if we fired a manager 1.5 years in, 2 years in, we've still been able to walk away with a piece of silverware to show for it. And we are now going on to the fifth manager, which will be the 10th manager in the 10 years of London is Blue podcast that we've had the chance to talk about on this show. On the men's side, we only talked about Emma
year.
Hayes.
Yeah.
We've only talked about Emma Hayes over the course of our time of doing this podcast on the women's side. So there is stability in some points of Chelsea, just not on the men's team. But I know, Nick, you want to go a little bit more into some of your thoughts on this.
Well, so like just take the three fires, right? And the criteria that we know about, right? Obviously winning, obviously adhering to this plan that has been bestowed upon each one of these managers, whether it be Tuchel, Potter, or Poch, right? Having a good relationship, being collaborative, you know, all the fan PR stuff that you have to do as the manager, all this sort of stuff. Like Tuchel clearly wasn't on board with the plan, although he got results and the results largely were really good, beloved by the fans. They didn't want to work with him, so they fired him, right? I mean, that was the end of it. Potter was their guy. They were excited to work with him. He seemed to be a young, bright manager. He seemed to want to be collaborative. At the end of the day, the results sucked, fired him, right? I don't count Frank or Bruno Saltor or any of this in this discussion, to be honest with you, because they were just, it was stopgaps. Poch seemed to be a blend of easy to work with, experienced Premier League, results really shaky for a long time, got there in the end, for at least met our expectations as a podcast, which I know means fuck all to these sporting directors. But at the end of the day, we're maybe wasn't the right fit, maybe didn't want to go fully along with the vision. So, Brandon, they're going to have to find somebody who's both a killer winner, gets results, gets into the Champions League, wins something, and someone who is just okay doing whatever the hell their plan is. So good luck with that.
But like everyone's reporting that they want a young manager, aka modern and progressive. So I don't see how that aligns. I don't see how that fits. Like this screams what was his name? The Portuguese that came in. I know it's three letters. Villas-Boas. This is where I see it all over again. Like you're having him come in. At least he doesn't have like the squad turnover, you know, because they kind of challenged him to clear out the squad. But young, progressive, unproven, outside of like one league. I mean, guys, we're linked with championship managers. What are we doing? And you're talking about Champions League? Like none of it makes sense. And to your point, like we've tried the EQ guy, right? Now we've tried the lemon guy. Like what we just got to have another specialist. Like we're going to find out that these guys have like their own little weird, you know, thing that they believe in or whatever. But it's like,
is Tony the Tiger available? Is the bounty guy available?
It's simple. Win matches and inspire these players to achieve more than they think they're capable of. That's the profile you want. And you've got to do it with these young players on huge wages on long contracts. Not easy because they've got all the leverage. Poch was on a 2-year contract. Amortize that.
So I think that highlights this idea of like, what are the cons of the decision? And then trying to say if there are any pros, can we try to make a case for it? That is a much harder, my list of cons versus list of pros that I was able to make a case for, very lopsided, but we'll try. So players being big fans and potentially being on long contracts, potentially wanting a move to get out of Chaos FC, that is a concern. I think it resets the momentum heading into next season that we were trying to capitalize on.
Big time.
Adds complexity into what our summer plans are. As of today, 64 days until the first preseason game, 88 days until the start of the new season. It's less than 90 days. Now, a lot of players will not be back at Cobham until mid-July timeframe based upon Euros, based upon other competitions. You know, so like that is, you know, I mean, you still need time to embed, build up your understanding of working at Chelsea. There'll be players around, regaining fitness and things of that nature, but you won't have your full squad readily available. Doesn't paint the ownership in the best light, which we have talked about. No manager since Thomas Tuchel has won any honors since 2021 at Chelsea. And it likely means that several players who were relied upon under this manager, like Conor Gallagher or Trev Chalobah heading into the end season, have had their fates likely sealed, would be my guess. Can you think of any more? Do you want to talk about any more of those cons individual?
Well, just on the summer of complexity, which is I think the official TM for this summer. It's now summer of complexity. Yeah, sure. We may not have a bunch of players at European tournaments, but our best players, or at tournaments across the world. Our best players are going to be there. There's a rumor Enzo might go play in the Olympics after playing in Copa America. What the fuck? There's a, obviously there's a huge chance that Cole Palmer and Conor Gallagher make the England squad for the Euros. You're looking across the board, and like the fact that Reece James and Ben Chilwell weren't selected by England, thank God. Like they're less chance to get injured over the summer now. But like this is it's a disaster for us right now. I mean, we are a week away from the end of May, which is crazy to say already. That means June. I think the first Euros game is what, June 14th or 15th, something like that. So that's basically, you have 2 weeks in June. You're going to be doing player sales during this time, most of which I'm sure I'm going to disagree with. You're going to have to hire a manager and figure out where he fits in the books at this time, whether he can start in June, whether he can start in July. I don't know. Who fucking knows? And you're going to have to do something that they have not yet done, but they're going to have to do, which is a huge PR campaign to figure out how to get people back on side. Because like there's not been a more unified point of this season than Poch being fired, and the whole of the Chelsea fan base on Twitter, on Instagram, on Reddit, going, what are they doing? What are you clowns doing right now? Like that is, I'm surprised it was only 80-20 in our straw poll earlier, because it seemed like 95-5 earlier, Brandon, when you looked at the reacts on Twitter. And again, it's not because I think we were in love with this manager. I've said that fully. But it's because we are tired, man. We are tired of the instability.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? I mean, I think Chelsea fans don't ask for a lot. I think when they bought the club, it was pretty straightforward on kind of what our vibe is, right? What we're looking for, and I think they're hearing this ain't it. It is interesting. I think everyone has now said whoever the next manager is, the pressure's not on them. The pressure's on the ownership group and the sporting directors, because
Ding, ding,
they are
ding.
the ones constantly agitating.
If I were a manager in the selection process for this, I'm raising my hand for this one all day. I will have never been given more of a free pass by a fan base than this next manager is going to have, because there will be no sane or rational Chelsea fan out there who will blame this hire for what is yet to come, which is another season of chaos. It's not on them. It's on the decisions that were made above their head. And everybody now knows that, right? Like it is very clear after three big manager firings and two big manager hires that the manager has very little control in this structure. They're supposed to go win games and nothing else, and just shut your mouth and agree with what we do. So I totally agree with that. I don't think any reasonable Chelsea fan, Dan, will go, new manager X, Y, or Z, this season's on you. You better get us to Europe. You better win the Europa League. You better get us to the Champions League.
How often are we rational as a group of people, though? Just to be fair,
I want people to remember this feeling that they have right now,
bottle it
because
up.
because it's not in this new person's hand. It's not. Many decisions have been taken before they get here that will impact their ability to do their job, and they're going to be given very little leash to change things themselves.
You know what I just thought about? Is that it almost, so you're reading about how, like, Dan, they want to assemble all of these pieces around the manager. It's like they want to spread out the responsibility so that if you have to chop and change the manager, it almost doesn't matter as much, because there's a specialist coach, like there's a fitness coach, there's performance coaches, there's the recruiting team. They're almost like chopping up the classic job description of Sir Alex Ferguson, who controlled everything from top to bottom, Arsene Wenger, Jose Mourinho, things like that, and are going, you know what? We're actually just going to hire a bunch of people around to almost create this flotation device around this person. And if they have to go, hopefully it will just be a far less impact. Because if they're looking at these like mainly inexperienced coaches and things like that, and they're adding all these peripheral pieces, that's how I'm starting to view it now.
Well, the joke earlier today that I made or followed up on rather, so when someone suggested that they're looking to hire Chat GPT as the next manager, is that basically you just have to be the best prompt engineer. So as a Chelsea manager in the model of Jose Mourinho or Carlo Ancelotti, design me a team that is capable of next season, one, achieving 85 points, and two, winning Europa League as long as we're in the competition. And detail a 20-point plan with the ideal lineup based on these players that we have into it and metrics available that would predicate success. And that might get you a really good initial game plan to start off of, but may not lead to the success that you're looking for. So I did try to outline a couple of, like, if you wanted to try to spin this in some way, a pro around this decision. The one I said, like, hey, if you think Poch was not going to make it through the entirety of next season, that he might stumble again, that there might be another hurdle, was it better to reset now? I'm going to go through like two or three more and then we can kind of talk about any of the ones. If you believe that his training methodology and load management was part of or all of the issue with reoccurring soft tissue injuries that have left many players out longer than they should have been in their rehabilitation cycle, maybe you've solved part of or all of the problem and you need to invest in the medical department, but that could be a positive spin. And then if you believe that Chelsea manager should not get to keep their job for participating in the role against the minimum expectations. And I would remind you, we were 5 points off of Champions League qualification. You made the point earlier, Brandon, that like with this squad, with he had these pieces, but I can remember several games that we just let slip through our fingers. And this Chelsea side could have been a year where we saw Arsenal and Man City go to the end of the season together, could have sleepwalked our way actually into fourth, if we had managed it better, could have won a trophy and could have made it into a second cup final. And so if we're saying that the standard is you have to get to the Champions League every single year and that you need to be deep into and win a domestic competition, we could argue that maybe this is actually a reinforcement of what the standard should be or a resetting of the expectation. Those are the three. If I had to
Yeah.
try to build a case, these are the ones that I would go
Yeah.
with.
I mean, I get that. We lost to a shit Liverpool side in extra time in the Carabao Cup. Van Dijk header, bad on set pieces. You know, there's definitely a really ugly run of matches in the middle. So, you know, for sure, the only problem though, Dan, is they showed patience all last season, and then they've showed it again this season. So, you know, I think that's obviously. I know you're trying to straw man that side of it for them, but yeah, it's definitely like a convenient thing that they can say after the fact. When in reality, I think it's been pretty evident that they've been saying, no, 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 we're patient, patient. It's a process. We're on a journey here. Now they're like, nope, draw the line, unacceptable. This is it. I just it's pretty pretty forgiving.
Can I just quickly say, like, a fourth and or fifth point here would be one, if he simply had it and didn't want to be here, like if that was a part of the the ethos of those meetings, and two, if he made a series of unreasonable demands that would get anyone fired in that situation. Those are two other things that could have sparked what was going on. Now, I would like to think that for this staff who are experienced, um, I wouldn't say they're experienced sporting directors, but they're experienced football professionals and experienced sports ownership, which Egbali and Boley and the rest of the crew are, because they've a ton of properties. You could figure out a way to work through the requests and come to some sort of amicable solution if you wanted to. So like that's kind of cutting against my own argument a little bit, but if that was truly like the vibe in those meetings, which is like, I did what I can do. If you don't give me what I need, I'm out. Then, then I understand it a little bit more. Now, I think the difficulty that they have as an ownership group right now is that because they have not talked at all, because they have not given updates, because they haven't shared their vision, because they haven't, outside of a bully at the whatever sporting finance conference 101 thing,
Well, so there
we don't know.
was giving a little bit of gratitude for it, even though it was the the easiest of efforts. There was the one page in the last match program of the season that did outline what the objectives were. Did it go as deep as I think anybody wants? Not necessarily, but was there at least something out there that we now have record and say, and we can point to, this is what the belief objective plan is, at least in a very broad, highly objective type of sense. And I don't think it necessarily fills the void. It's not necessarily, it's maybe a little cotton candy when you're looking for some, steak and mashed potatoes, but it's out there at least. So we're going to take our last ad break. When we get back, your 3-word reactions to Poch being removed, agreed to let go, departing, and then also talking about what comes next, along with who those manager candidates are that Chelsea are investigating. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, Nick, just to break it up before we talk about those manager candidates, let's talk a little bit about what the people thought. We did have some 3-word reactions to Pochettino departing Chelsea, and I did pick a few that I thought would, tickle your fancy.
Yeah. Well, it's a weird day, so we're just gonna go forward here. M Dempsey CPA with no plan FC, Chris L with unnecessary chaos again. We used to say chaos and trophies; those were the days. Canyon C with potched that higher instead of botched. You potched. That's pretty cool. Adventures of Crowderville, Paul Crowder. Happy Groundhog's Day. Yeah, feels like it kind of. Jen the Wonderkind, Why Clear Lake Why, Keith Schackenberg with Bartum and Bowley, which I thought was pretty clever, and that's nice little circus reference there for everybody. Marga Martin Lund with So Long Farewell with the Von Trapps. That's an excellent Sound of Music reference. Well done. My grandma made me watch that movie 150 times when I was growing up, so I know it well. Blue Bandit CFC with Higher Fire Repeat. One Brandon Busby. What is yours?
Trust without process. They always say trust the process with these rebuilds and things. There's none. I don't see it. I'm officially checked out on the decision makers right now, which is annoying. So, anyways, Dan, what about you?
What comes next is a very open-ended question to, I think, what is now a multitude of problems that present themselves to this offseason. And I don't have a lot of answers. And I sure as hope our new manager, our new head coach, and our sporting directors have the answer to that question.
I went with scrutiny for scrutinizers.
It's like for dummies book.
Who is who's doing the end of
Watchmen?
season review for the sporting directors and decision makers? Yeah, I think it's a completely fair thing to do for the manager, the staff, all that sort of stuff. But where's the accountability further up the chain? Like ultimately, it does go to Iqbali and Todd Bowley and the Clear Lake Consortium, who have made these grand promises, have spent all this money, and are going to be on the hook for it because they've already spent it. But in the middle management staff beneath them, where does that happen? I'm curious.
And this happens in June. You're gonna have to pay him a second year. Like now, I'm already going back to like more, of the financial fair play and the PSR and all that fun stuff. Like, all right, add it up, Dan. It's just piling and piling.
Good thing we had that Bing X sponsorship to cover the Pochettino compensation and departure that really came good here. So let's talk about what comes next. So
Wasn't that your
there
3-word
seems to be a
match
short
review?
list.
Yeah, Dan.
Again, works out well, huh? So David Ornstein was reporting on Sky Sports that Chelsea will be looking to make an appointment in days rather than weeks. That's information coming out of Stamford Bridge tonight. I mean, to be fair, the Graham Potter thing escalated extremely quickly when that came to fruition. And so Chelsea has this new ownership group at times has moved very quickly and decisively when they've made a decision. Nick?
What this made me think of though. Just you brought that up, the Graham Potter thing moving fast. How Lampard was there for his Last Supper, and Cesc Fabregas was there the other day at training, and I was like, now I'm starting to wonder. Now it's all kind of matriculating through my head as to like what is are they showing the ex-wife the new girlfriend before the divorce is finalized? Like, what are we doing here? Like,
Also, you are talking about how they move fast, Dan. The difference was we didn't have co-sporting directors back then. Like, how fast did they move on Caicedo? How fast did they move on Enzo? These two knuckleheads don't move fast on anything, so I'm out.
Did move a little faster on Cole Palmer. Got it done deadline day, and that was something that came and went pretty quick. So, I mean, again, we have a whole lot to get into in our season review. This is focused specifically on the next manager for Chelsea that we were not planning to talk about on this Tuesday, May the 21st. So, young progressive coach was the pitch that we've been sold, is what Chelsea are looking for. I also conducted another snap poll just because people were going to ask the question of like, hey, if you had an option for the never managed at Chelsea or previously managed us, it shades just heavily 51 to 49% previously managed. However, all the reports indicate that Jose Mourinho, Thomas Tuchel, and Antonio Conte, the three available managers, because they don't currently have a club, are not likely under consideration at this point. So I think we just need to move on, Nick, as a fan base, and just transition to these serious contenders.
I'm not sure that if the sporting directors could go get Carlo Ancelotti right now, that they would. Like, that's where I'm at with this. Like, it's kind of insane. But I also disagree with this. Like, you don't go back. How many times have we seen it not work? You just don't go back. Like, if you're gonna make the change, you got to try something new. And yeah, it's 51-48 for previously managed. So yeah, I mean, the names that were mentioned earlier today were, I'll be honest, underwhelming. Uh, Now the criteria being young, progressive, really great attack, and really great defense. That was my favorite part of the briefing that was put out there. Thanks, guys. Football, really cool.
Football's real good.
Yeah. Also, goalkeeping and shooting at goal. Those are two things we want. The names that were listed through various reports, including Matt Laws, who I will talk to tomorrow. Stuttgart's Sebastian Hoeneß, who surprising second in the Bundesliga for Stuttgart, a team that was almost relegated the year before. So that was, yeah, clearly there's a great job being done there. Girona's manager, Michel, who guided his team to Champions League qualification in kind of a surprise way. So that's really interesting. So a couple of themes there with Champions League qualification. Then one that I think a lot of people are pumped about, but has never managed one Premier League game before, and that's Ipswich Town's Kieran McKenna. Also linked to Brighton. This guy took Ipswich up for the first time in 20 something years. And obviously, Amari Hutchinson was a big part of his plan. Leicester City's Enzo Maresca, who I think Leicester won the championship, right? So, there's a thing there, but has never managed in the Premier League. And then one that is puzzling as all fuck to me. I do not understand this link at all, which is Brentford's Thomas Frank. Now, I like Thomas Frank. I think he is doing a ton with what he has available to him, right? He's making the best meal with the ingredients in his cupboard, dealt with a half-year suspension for his idiot striker who placed a bunch of bets and all that sort of stuff. But not exactly progressive football, nor a serial winner in the Premier League. So that's kind of weird. The other names, Brandon, Eddie Howe, Roberto De Zerbi, Ruben Amorim, which we'll talk here separately. But any thoughts on the initial five?
One season wonders. And obviously they've had careers that got them to this place, but like, is Girona going to do it again? Is Stuttgart going to finish above Bayern again? This is the equivalent, Dan, of buying the top player at a tournament. This is where you overpay, you buy in the
Ding, ding,
moment
ding.
instead of like having sound thought process on this. And I am just back to, how is a manager at this level kind of manage Premier League players on weekly wages more than what they're used to seeing in a year? And that's not being disrespectful. It's the real deal. If you want to manage high profile, high producing salespeople that make upwards of seven figures, and all you've done is run a team of outbound cold callers that make 60 grand a year, it's going to be different. And I think we see this at every stage. You need a strong character to align these big egotistical professionals who are on long contracts, and none of these names get me excited. But I will say, I don't watch the Bundesliga. I didn't watch La Liga. I sure as hell did not watch the championship this season. But there's a profile and an aura that is required. You think of Jose Mourinho, Thomas Tuchel, Antonio Conte, even Poch. There was an aura that came with them. Like, this isn't a feeder club.
The alpha dog is here, right? That's the aura. Like, no one's gonna fuck with me. Do your job.
So the only manager who has won in a top flight league. So Maresca gets credit for winning the championship this past season, gets to put a little bit of an honors mark on his Wikipedia page. Amaron is the only one. He's a two-time Premier Liga winner in Portugal. So like he has that as a plus plus, I think, in his column. I did some snap polls just on like, would you be as a supporter in favor, unsure, or not in favor of the appointment? Out of all of the individuals that we just discussed, the only individual that was able to get above 50% individually for a in favor was Ruben Amaran as a candidate. Now, he's not listed amongst Matt's or some of the others' top candidate selection. I do believe that he has a release clause, which you can dig into with Matt tomorrow, Nick, that would make it a little bit more expensive to go out and get him. But we know and have heard that he is someone that the Chelsea hierarchy likes. The other ones, I mean, Honus has a little bit better favorability metric, 33%, 43% unsure on that, and then 24% not in favor. Again, he managed Hoffenheim for 81 matches. He managed Stuttgart for 51 matches. His total win-loss is 82 wins, 37 draws, 50 losses, 169 professional games managed at top flight. Like, not a ton of history. If you go to Michel, 285 games managed. He had Rayo Valenciano and Huska as well, in addition to Girona. So he's had more club experience. And then McKenna is a really interesting one because he had a lot of time as an assistant manager to multiple Manchester United managers before his 131 matches that he has notched up for Ipswich at this point, which was at a 75, 36, 20. So, I mean, at least it is a better record than some of the other candidates. But, if you have a competition going on, Brandon, for him with Brighton, maybe the club favor or like the idea of going after someone they've got a straight line to versus trying to have to go into any type of bidding war or fight to get the guy they want.
I mean, there's not a lot in here. It's hard to connect the dots. Like, we always talk about like, do the owners understand the supporters? Is there a connection there? And again, like, Chelsea's profile is pretty clear cut. None of this is that. And the absolute piss take would be De Zerbi. Like, let's be honest.
God.
Like, it would be maybe not as bad, but like not far off from Benitez when Rafa came. And so some of these guys have like well under 10 years, right? And you're telling me that that's where we're going. The reason comes back to me, Dan, is that these sporting directors want someone they can push around, put in their box, have leverage over, because they know they can't control an alpha manager with a strong understanding of what they want and do it their way. And I think they are setting Chelsea up for a disaster through their arrogance. That is my key theme throughout all of this, is unbelievable arrogance from the sporting directors when they have zero track record or proof that they can do it at this level. None of them have been at this level.
Yeah, and I would also just say really quickly, like, if you watched any of De Zerbi's press conferences this year, it's not as if he was like a church mouse.
He peaked in preseason like we did.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is None of these options are very good. Let's just be very clear about that. The one that I like the best, I think the one that has had a fair amount of support and fanfare is Ruben Amorim. He seems to be a winner. He seems to have has a system that takes advantage of the strengths of his players, and I can understand that. I mean, the fact that he's been at Sporting for almost 1,600 days, and has a decent contract on him, has won stuff, 149 wins, 32 draws, 31 losses. This is a guy who clearly has established a period of dominance in Portugal for himself. And I think, even if you take his Europa League experience, right, which I think would be telling because that, knock on wood, is where we're going to, which competition we'll be in next year, not the Conference League. I think his team overperformed against some of the, your Arsenals of the world in that competition. And so I think that there is probably the strongest case to be made for him. I think everybody is intrigued by McKenna. Everybody is intrigued because Ipswich played some like absolute dynamite football this year. But does that translate to the Premier League for guys never managed in that league before? I mean, be young and exciting and fun all you want, but at the end of the day, we've seen young, exciting, and fun get slapped around in this league. Like, you have to be tough, gritty, and determined to do anything in the Premier League. Style is far inferior to substance in this league. So I, again, I'm not thrilled with any of these. De Zerbi would be my least favorite of that group for sure. I don't like the dude, and I don't think I would rally around him at all. But this is it's a tough list. It's a tough list. And someone on Twitter said earlier, every time Chelsea used to fire a manager, we'd look at Juventus manager, or Inter Milan's manager, or a former Real Madrid manager, or whatever. And now we're looking at the championship and some, what was nearly a relegation Bundesliga team last year. And I think Honus already said he's staying at Stuttgart, which is a incredibly smart move.
Well, so as we think about this summer, though, there are a lot of top vacancies available. I mean, the Bayern Munich job is one that I think a lot of talented managers would see as a great opportunity, particularly after the season they had. To go back and win next season would be
Hmm.
fantastic. So I don't think there's a shortage of talented managers in addition to a lot of new spots that are open that someone may see as very attractive compared to what has been a little bit of shotgun approach to operating a football club from Chelsea and Clear Lake Capital at this point. But we're not going to get deep into all these managers just yet. There's more details to come over the next 24, 48, 72 hours. If the Orange Team report is to be believed, days, not weeks, until Chelsea appoint a new manager. So we're going to wrap on this one. We've got a Matt pod coming out very, very shortly that Nick will be recording in the AM of May the 22nd. We will get that out as quickly as we possibly can to you. I've tapped Sam, as CFC Central, to see if we can't pull forward some of our prep work that we had done in case of this type of emergency to talk about a few of these managers in more detail. If we can whittle down this list to give you some perspective on who might be the best fit or what a fit at Chelsea might look like, and so much more. But that's going to do it for this episode. So until next time, Chelsea fans, stay as calm as possible and keep the blue flag flying high.